morning. Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. If you are here live in the Museum of Science, we wanted to let you know that we are recording a live stream right now. We are in partnership here with the Museum of Science, thanks to our friend James Monroe. And we are coming from the theme today called Being Human. And I have a guest this morning who is a great human being. He is a artist. He is a I almost said publicist. A artist, a author, a commentator, a historian. And if you're in the sound of my voice, we want to welcome you to come join us in the Gordon Center here to listen to our live stream. But if you're watching online, welcome. Hit that share button, and we're glad to have you here in the Java Cafe today. So without further ado, he's not a stranger to the Java Cafe. He's been with us at least 2 or 3 times before. Probably three or four. So this is the 5th. And so do me a favor, hit that share button, because when Dart Adams speaks, everybody needs to listen. So Dart, welcome to the Java Cafe again. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. And also it's like a big deal to be in the Museum of Science, you know, a place where if you were a Boston Public School kid, this was a frequent visit of yours. And it's like it sticks out in your mind. You know, they're like the top 3 places that you visited as a child. There was the Museum of Science, there was the aquarium, and then there was the Museum of Fine Arts. And those were all like the key memories, the core memories of your childhood, growing up and going to the Boston Public Schools.
Definitely being a BPS kid, every year in the spring, we would look forward to going to the Museum of Science. I think you said Stone Zoo, maybe a couple of beaches or whatever, but you did not go to BPS without coming to the Museum of Science.
No, absolutely
at some point during the year. So let's just jump right in. First of all, say good morning to the folks, introduce yourself. And I would ask you, how would you describe being human right now in one word after your introduction?
Hello, everyone. Dart Adams, born and bred Bostonian. I'm a journalist, historian, author. I do a lot of fact checking and, you know, things of that nature, which is very important right now. But in terms of what being human means in this moment right now, it's very important because I think that there's a lack of empathy across the board in terms of dealing with and cycling what people are going through and their feelings and their emotions in terms of like all the turmoil in the nation. And being human means that you still have that empathy and that compassion for your fellow person. And also you want for them what you want for yourself.
Absolutely. And when you talk about the empathy and compassion, one of the ways that we can have empathy and compassion for someone or an issue or a community is to be familiar with their story, is to be familiar with their narrative. And so, you know, anyone that knows you knows that you're a writer. You talk about fact checking and whatnot. So I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. We're here at the Science Museum. Would you say there is an actual science to telling stories? How do you approach telling someone's story so, you know, you can portray their empathy and the real, you know, what they're really trying to put out there that you're trying to extract from them?
Yeah, I think that that's the through line with any storytelling that I've discovered growing up, whether it was cartoons, comic books, a newspaper article, anything of that nature, a book, novella, is that you wanted to reach the person on an emotional level, the reader. If there was no emotional content or you weren't connected to that piece of material, then it wasn't going to get across. So when you read a comic book, you kind of identified with the characters or the people or what they were going through. There was a through line that made you, you know, connect to the story and these people in an interconnected, you know, the inter and intrapersonal plays. So what I realized was when I'm doing history, it's the same thing. A lot of kids used to be completely disconnected from history because they felt like it didn't deal with them. But the thing about history is if you don't know it, you're doomed to repeat it. But also you have to make history kind of reflect what's going on now. Because the thing about Boston is we're 23, 24, 25 neighborhoods, depending on who you ask and if they're in real estate.
Facts.
And some neighborhoods bleed into each other and spill over into each other, and some are completely disparate and separated from each other. And in terms of storytelling, there are some neighborhoods that are off in the corner that if you're not there and you haven't lived there for the past 2 or 3 generations, you have no idea what's happening.
You don't know the story.
Versus the neighborhoods that bleed into each other. Sometimes there might be gentrification over a generation or two, and a lot of the history is lost because the people who were there and lived it are no longer there to tell the people that moved in next. And they kind of reshape it to what they want it to be. And in terms of like what it means to tell stories, you now have to captivate the people and tell them what was there before, how the people lived there before, and how it's changed over time. So a lot of storytelling I do is about buildings that no longer exist, spaces that are no longer used the way they were before, and letting people know, how it still relates to their everyday lives.
In that context of what was there, what's now, let's go a little bit of what's now and what's to come. You mentioned the fact that, we are in interesting times, and the museum has this theme of being human. You talk about storytelling.
Yes.
How important is it for us to continue to tell the stories about the different parts and the different things that make up our wide, diverse humanity? How important is it that in these times that we understand the science of storytelling and actually keep telling the stories?
Well, for one thing, the one issue with Boston is that people have this idea of who lives here and who occupies the city because of media. So when you watch films, television, and commercials, if you only see one kind of person or one kind of ethnicity or one kind of accent, then you have the idea that, oh, this is all Boston is. It's the totality of it.
Wait, did you say, when you say Boston, you say accent? I couldn't let that go because we're known for our park the car. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So and the thing is that's a regional accent. It's the accent that you could find in New Hampshire. You could find it out in Maine. It's not just isolated to 25 neighborhoods in Boston.
Wait a minute, you went to 25? I thought it was.
Yeah, again,
you just added another hood.
You have to add. Sometimes you have to add extra because again, if you're in real estate, the waterfront is a neighborhood. Fort Point is a neighborhood, and then someone's going to argue with you.
And then we're going to soon have Dorchester Bay City,
or
something like that. Yeah, so we'll be 25.
Yeah. So like when you think about that, and also the beauty of Boston is that this is a city that a lot of ingenious people built. Yes. It's not how it looked back in the 1630s, 1700s, 1750s, 1850s. I live in the South End, Lower Roxbury, which was filled in and created in the 1800s. So if you look at old maps of Boston, all of a sudden, there's a brand new neighborhood here. There's a brand new part of the city here. This part of the city has been reused, resectioned, redistributed in different ways. So when we're telling the story of Boston, and we're telling the story of neighborhoods, and we're telling the story of people, new neighborhoods, people moving into new areas, interacting with each other from different backgrounds and different cultures, that creates a new culture.
And a new narrative. If you will. Okay.
Because the West End, where we are, was overly raised for the most part. And now, if you think about the migration, if you think about Black people in Boston, we were in the North End at one point. And Beacon Hill around Cops Hill. And then we got pushed out there. Then we moved to the West End. The West End got raised. So then we will move to the South End, Lower Roxbury, North Dorchester, then Mattapan. And when you think about telling stories, when a population comes in and they interact, that creates a new culture. And then if they move to a new place, that creates a new culture. And that shapes the story of Boston in real time.
Okay. There's a couple of things, and we got a few minutes. And if you watch, that I can go 5 or 6 different ways.
Yes.
One of the things that you talked about, and this will merge us into this conversation.
Yes.
One of the other pieces is you talked about Back Bay. You talked about it being filled in. You're a historian.
Yes.
Let's merge into a little bit. We're going to end up with climate change.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the fact that parts of our city are heavily impacted by climate change, and we need to be in tune with environmental and climate justice. I mean, look where we are. And so take us a little bit of you talked about the migration. Talk to us a little bit about the landfill to educate the folks. And then let's talk about stories and a narrative when it comes to BIPOC, Black and Brown people, and it comes to environmental justice, because I think there's a narrative that needs to be
Oh yeah.
clarified.
Yeah.
So Back Bay.
Okay,
and
so
up until-
Back Bay gets filled in and created. It was mostly marshland, and a lot of times there were a lot of ports around. Griffith Wharf, you know, all these different areas. So a lot of that area got filled in, and you look at what happened with Beacon Hill, overly hilly, and there were a lot of like detonations. They take the dirt from there and they move it to other places. This is also how Jamaica Plain was built. Jamaica Plain, there was a lot of explosions, detonations, destroying hills and taking the land, the slate and the dirt, and filling in other parts of Boston. So they flattened out part of Beacon Hill, even though Beacon Hill is still hilly.
Yes.
They flattened out Jamaica Plain a lot, even though Jamaica Plain still has hills in it.
Now, where in Jamaica Plain? Because I've heard that about Back Bay and
Yes.
Beacon Hill in different areas, but JP, I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, absolutely. Like, to the point, that's how Jamaica Plain got its name, because the people that lived there, in order to get them off the land so they can do all these things, they would have to trade with them. And what they did was the triangle trade included rum. And they wanted, what type of rum did they want? Jamaica. And it was the Jamaica Plain. So that's how this land got its name. A lot of people don't know that.
Okay, so yeah, we're going to have you on a whole different sort of episode.
But,
okay,
but
what are
in
those
terms-
areas?
but-
Yes.
But the thing is that what happens is over time, when you build these neighborhoods in that manner, and you're 6 feet above sea level to begin, if you go to Downtown Crossing, a lot of times you're going to see a sign that says hollow street, hollow sidewalk.
Yep.
And sometimes if you're around certain areas, you see the same thing. And you start to ask yourself, wait, how are we standing in a
On a
part of the
hollow
city where there's a hollow sidewalk? And that's when you have to start thinking about what happens if the water level rises. And we've seen it happen sometimes when there's flooding in Fort Point, the Channel, and the waterfront.
There's a part right now in Devon Street in
Yes.
Dorchester, and there's been, and we're going somewhere with this piece around climate justice and environmental justice. Some of the belief is because the storm drains have not been cleaned, but I'm
Yes.
venturing because Devon, Elm Hill, Blue Hill Ave.
Yes.
Is that, what do you call that when it comes down? And I know you know the term, when you have a hilly area and all that rain is gathering. But
Mhm.
my point is, it's not just 4 Point and other areas. There are places now in the hood
Mhm.
that are being, yesterday, the day we had that big monsoon 2 days ago,
Yes.
there were pictures where there was at least a foot high, I don't know if you call it puddle, on Devon Street in
Yes.
Dorchester.
I mean, I did a speaking engagement at the library at in Roxbury, you know, right there where like Nubian Square is. And it started raining during it. And at the end, it was like monsoon rain. And by the time I came out, there were huge puddles all over, you know, Nubian Square. And it got to the point where after 15 minutes, you couldn't safely walk anywhere because the puddles were so big. And that was just a monsoon rain that stopped after 45 minutes. And that flooding lasted, you know, until the next day.
And let's just name, there have been a lot that we're used to those, but the density and how often we're having those now are more often.
Well, if you look at 1990 and you look at how many days above 90 degrees we had in Boston, it would be like 7 or 8. And right now, we're getting to the point where it's projected by 2030, we're going to be seeing between 25 and 30 of those days.
This year alone, we just came out of 3 days of 90 and above. I think this was our third or fourth cycle, because we had early in the summer, there was a heat wave.
Yes.
And so we're at least 10 to 12 now.
Yeah, and when you think about how it affects Black, BIPOC, Latino, Asian neighborhoods, we have the Emerald Necklace, but it's mostly in the Back Bay and other areas. And then we come into the areas connected, which is usually where I live. I live in the Back Bay, Lower Roxbury, so I can walk to the Back Bay. I can walk to Downtown Crossing and all these other places. I can walk straight to the Charles River Reservation and straight down to the Boston, you know, the Boston Garden, you know, and then to Boston Common, you know, the public garden and then the common. But that's not necessarily how it is where I am. And when you have a bunch of brick, you don't have a lot of trees. When it gets hot, it gets hotter in these neighborhoods, and you need cooling stations, which is one of the things that the city kind of came up with
Yes.
to
At the
combat that.
BCY, yep.
And the only way to do, and the only reason that is because we actually applied science to figure out like how is this heat wave affecting the population in different neighborhoods of the city where they don't have access to certain things.
Which one of them is called sort of the canopy, with trees, the
Yes.
canopy covering and
The
whatnot.
canopy covering,
So
yeah.
with that, it's interesting, and we got a few minutes left, but I wanted to, let's now have this conversation
Mhm.
about this misnomer, and you talk about correct narratives
Yeah.
that, climate change, environmental justice, Black and brown people are not concerned about it, quote unquote, it's a white issue, da 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 da.
Yeah, absolutely.
Based on what we just talked about, one of the things that brought climate change to my attention was the realization of what you said around the concrete, mainly in our neighborhoods.
Yes.
When that heat happens, even with the canopy and the evening comes,
Mhm.
that concrete holds the heat.
Yes.
I'm going to say something that's interesting. Most everyone, but there's a joke in our culture that
Yeah.
we don't like to be hot
Yeah.
and we get agitated, which is easier
Yes.
for incidents of violence.
Yeah.
Do you think that's that far-fetched?
No, because if you go back to the 60s and 70s, no matter what neighborhood it was, whenever there were high rates of heat, the hottest days, the police and everybody was usually on notice that that was going to be a day of violence, incidents of violence. And when you look at films about like the days of like the civil rights movement or the counterculture era, they would always be on high alert whenever there was the hottest days. And that was for everybody. Now think about how that happens in the inner city when you don't have access to certain things.
Yes.
And you're cut off from certain things, and also you're over policed, and also you don't have adequate food options, and also you might have to travel longer to get to a supermarket, and you have less access to public transit, or when you do have public transit, there's no cover at the station for a hot day. What does that mean over time?
See, this is the point that I want to make, that I want us to take advantage. And James, I'm glad we have this opportunity to record this and get this out here. We are seeing increases of the impact
Yes.
of climate change everywhere.
Yeah.
What I said to someone, what is the real narrative about environmental justice and climate change for Black folks, BIPOC, marginalized communities? And I know you'll say, well, James, I can't speak to everybody, but for what you know and what your research, what is the real narrative?
Well, it has a lot to do with the practice of redlining and redistricting
Yep.
neighborhoods, renaming neighborhoods, and then what you put in a certain neighborhood for the people that live there versus what do you not have available for everybody else.
Yeah.
That's just maybe a block and a half away. Like this is a real reality. I live in the Back Bay, Lower Roxbury. The South End, Lower Roxbury, near the Back Bay, and I live in the 02116 zip code. Now I have neighbors that live on side streets. I've lived in my neighborhood for 50 years. I have neighbors on side streets that probably have no idea who I am if it wasn't for me being in a bunch of documentaries.
Yep.
And probably don't interact with me that much. But the thing is that a mile away or a half mile away from where I am, somebody's life expectancy is years higher than their neighbor who lives in a housing development, a half mile, a mile away from them, who's their neighbor.
Is environment really an impact on that? Let's unpack.
Yes, absolutely.
We got about 9, maybe 10, James, 9 minutes. Let's unpack that a little bit about the environment. There's just so much.
Go ahead.
Okay,
so one instance is that I was doing a project and I started to look up because I'm working with Everyone 250.
Yes.
And one of the project things about Everyone 250 is we want to frame Boston's history for a new generation of people, because the bicentennial 1975 to 1976,
Yep.
we're finding historical sites of significance for people to visit Boston. And they overlooked a lot of Black, Latino, Asian sites. And so I get the job to do it now. But when I'm doing it, I'm thinking, wait a second. I live in Methunia Manor, which was built between 1970 and 1971, made of brick, mortar. I have friends that live in another housing development further down in Chinatown, and their building was built first in 71. Via Victoria was built between 69 and 70, brick. And then you go further down, you have Tai Tung Village, which was built in 1973. You have Mass Ave Towers further down in Chinatown, which was built in 1973. And then you have the new schools that were built. You got the Blackstone built in 1975 right there in Via Victoria, which I told you when it was built.
Yep.
But then you have the Quincy, which is also built mostly brick, stone in 1975. McKinley made mostly a brick and stone in 1975. And you realize that all these new buildings were made to stand the test of time because of the old dilapidated buildings that were, there for centuries,
Okay.
from
From the
previous
16th
times, from the,
yep.
from the previous times. But what it did was it created this whole area and region that was made heavily of brick and stone and metal. And they've been there for over 50 years. And what happens is they all retain heat every summer. And there was no thought to environmental justice. There was no thought to the effects of this. And when you think about in Chinatown, the playground that the kids had was called at the time Pagoda Park. And it was near 3 expressways.
Which is a whole issue with emissions.
Yes.
And
Yes. So the joke was back in the 80s that if you played at Pagoda Park, that you were huffing exhaust fumes. And now Reggie Wong Memorial Park is completely abandoned, whether it be for people who played volleyball in the neighborhood, because at one point this is only playground in Chinatown. So whether you played, elders played volleyball, whether kids played basketball, whether guys came to skate, it's unused now
because of the
environment, because it's near the silicates, the heat, everything. And it's near everything, in 3 different expressways and 3 different lanes. So when you think about environmental justice and what it means in real time, I see it every day just walking down the street in my neighborhood.
With our last few minutes, I wanted to be sure that what is it that you would recommend to the community to really get involved and pay attention to environmental justice? And then also, I would also ask you, we're going to have you here, and I know you can do it, to young people, any young people that are looking to get into science. STEM and STEAM is,
absolutely.
The trending thing. So advice and then encouragement, and then we're going to hear what you have going on and how people can follow and contact Doc, because I'm sure you all do want to follow him. So advice for the community to be involved, daily practices to help the environment, any advice you want to give.
I mean, the one thing is that Boston has a unique, it's a unique situation being in Boston, because I say that Boston is the size of Shaq's left shoe, right? It's not 6 degrees of separation in Boston. It's like 1.52 at most. Everybody
say one.
Yeah,
Because in Boston it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah, and who you know is probably your cousin. And the thing is that we're so on top of each other and next to each other that we can't turn a blind eye to situations like this, because if it's affecting your neighbor, it's affecting you.
Yes.
And it's not a matter of time, it's actually now, right? So, and then in terms of the youth and getting into science, the way we've had these advances in recent years is mostly through younger people who've got into science and technology and looked through these issues with a different lens, because it impacted them differently when they were younger, and they asked the questions and wondered, how come this isn't being done? How come this isn't being addressed? So they went and did studies, and they, came up with their own funding and everything else. And they're the ones that pushed the idea of, the environment and justice. When I was a kid, the idea of Earth Day didn't come from older people. The idea of trying to tamp down emissions, this didn't come from older people. This came from young people who were wondering, why were things changing in the environment? Why are the polar ice caps melting? There were scientists who thought this, but then there was somebody younger from a younger generation who said, hey, let's actually look into this and put real science and thought into this. So it's always on the younger people, because the thing is that this is the world we're going to leave to them. And they usually get concerned about it, because they're like, hey, are you guys looking at what's happening and how it's affecting X, Y, and Z? So I always think that we always have to rely on the youth, but also we need to encourage them, because in previous generations, I say going back to the 60s and 70s, we were looking at older people were looking at them wondering why they were wasting their time
worrying
with
about,
these pursuits and worrying about these things.
and here we are today.
And here we are today.
And going back to Earth Day, if I don't know the exact time, but I remember being a senior in high school,
Mhm.
and that was 1990.
Yeah.
Earth Day is been around for what's that, 25 30, well,
The
35
first time
years.
I heard that Earth Day was in the 80s.
In the 80s.
Yeah. And it became a bigger thing in the 90s
Okay.
because a new media like Nickelodeon,
Yes.
you know,
and young people led
yeah.
the charge.
Yep, like, you know, Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, all these other things, and because it was what concerned young people, and that's what raised the profile of it.
Last question: do you believe that is that the foundation? With here, there's so many young people running around here in the Science Museum today. Do you believe that they are going to be a major foundation in addressing climate justice, environmental justice, and also with AI? We didn't even get into AI. 2 minutes of young people in AI before we go. What are your thoughts there about the impact of AI, and especially from an equity standpoint? Because whenever there are new type of developments, BIPOC, marginalized community, women, they tend to not be at the forefront of a lot of the recognition. They're doing the work, but not the recognition. What would you say about AI and equity?
I think that one of the issues is that I think AI is overused in certain situations. And when you look at like ChatGPT and the things needed to use to make it work, and it causes environmental issues in Black communities, especially in Memphis. But when I think about like how AI is supposed to be used, it's supposed to be by somebody who's knowledgeable on a subject, who needs it to fill in a blank, and that's it, as opposed to doing the overwhelming majority of the work.
Now, let's just name a little bit. When you said ChatGPT, you're a writer.
Yes.
You're a creative.
Yes.
It's a little bit extra for you when it comes to, I'll be honest, there's some time where I know I can write it, but I will put 2 or 3 prompts in a ChatGPT and edit it.
I mean, I'm somebody who used to get calls when I worked at record stores and video stores, and people used to just ask me directly because there was no way to use Google. So I was Google. So from somebody with that perspective and that background, I'm always somebody who thinks like, figure it out. You know, you can figure it out. I have trust in you. You know, I believe in you. You know, like the coach, the football coach, I believe in you. You know, you could do it. You know, give it the old college try. Because I think that it's going to a point where people use it for everything. You know, I don't know how to tie my shoe. ChatGPT help me. I have this in my kitchen. I mean, ChatGPT tell me what to cook. That's overboard. That's when you just don't want to think. Or you go to a restaurant and the menu's in front of you and you're like, what should I eat? That's crazy.
Dart, this isn't fair. Okay, 30 seconds because it's 10:30. In the realm of using our brains and being human,
Yes,
does that concern you?
absolutely. Absolutely. I grew up with a whole bunch of science fiction novellas, short stories, books, films, animation, Japanese and otherwise, and they kind of told us about what could happen if we're not careful in terms of technology. And I've been reading these short stories by authors that were written in the 30s, 40s, from pulp novels, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And to see some of these things actually take place, I'm like, we did not heed the warnings of these authors, you know, men and women who told us that this might possibly happen. Like the first mention of a robot is 1921 in a play called R.U.R., right? And, you know, Jules Verne kind of told us, you know, about space travel in 1868, and a lot of these things have come to pass, and us not heeding these warnings, like a Ray Bradbury and Fahrenheit 451, we're kind of repeating these patterns.
Okay, we have to get ready to wrap up. I want to stay in the good graces of my good friend here at the museum, but we are going to be back here on October 15th. More information is going to come about that. Dart, real quick, what's coming up for you, and how can people reach you?
Right now, I'm working with Mathematic Athletics, and we make clothing and tell narratives and stories about Boston and through the medium of sports. And basically, what I do now is I work with Everyone 250, and I'm the chair of the historical sites subcommittee. And basically, what we do is we mark important sites that people are going to visit in 2026 when we celebrate the 250th anniversary of America.
And how can people contact you? Give me your IG real quick. Well, or what is your preferred? Is it IG?
Yeah, Instagram is Dart_Adams. I'm on Blue Sky at Dart Adams. And that's pretty much where you can find me the most. If you just type Dart Adams into a search,
There'll
be a lot of pictures of me. Unfortunately,
go to Chat GBT and say, and we got Dr. Laugh on camera. All right, we're going to get ready to go, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We will be back here at the museum. Please go to Google the Museum of Science, and please make sure that you keep up with what's going on with programming. We will be back here 2 months from today on October 15th to celebrate our community recognition time. And so thank you for being with us today, and we will see you on Monday morning at 10 a.m.